Have you been wondering how organisations around the world are solving plastic pollution? Or whether our individual actions are making any difference? Or even how to get something going yourself? Tune in for conversations with me, Nat, founder of City to Sea, and my inspirational guests from around the world. Welcome to Nat's Chat. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm very excited this month to have Toral Shah joining us, and she's going to be talking to us about the links between human health and planetary health. But before we get going, I'll just tell you a little bit about her to get you as excited as I am. She is a nutritional scientist, a functional medicine practitioner, and all-round inspiration, really, especially for me on Instagram, but for lots of other people in person, when it comes to talking about food and health and equality, and specifically really around cancer prevention. So I thought she'd be a great guest to talk to. I have lots of questions. So welcome, Toral.
Thank you so much for having me, Nat. It's so great that we get to talk today.
It is, and thank you for your support of City to Sea as well. I know you've been a supporter of our campaign, so it's great to have you here. So how's your week been? How are you doing right now in this moment?
It's been a really hectic week. It is the beginning of Breast Cancer Awareness Month, so it's the beginning of October, and it's also Black History Month. So for me, these two topics are really important to me. So I'm talking a lot about breast cancer awareness, but also about health inequality, because sadly, people of colour in the UK, so people from the BAME and BIPOC communities, have poorer health outcomes, whether we're talking COVID, cancer, or childbirth, or anything else. Yeah. And I think this will kind of lead into some of the things that we're going to talk about, because until we have health equality for all, whoever we may be, then we're never actually going to have equality for women. We're never going to be looking after our planet in the same way. It's all intersectional. I think people forget that.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's really important that we at City to Sea are aware of, and also educating ourselves and educating our audience as well around that, because it's been quite difficult for some of our audience to see the connection, say, between plastic and so sort of environmental justice around plastic and social justice around plastic. So touching on that intersection is really important. And personally, I wasn't even aware. I think it was the last Black Lives Matter march that I went on, and I saw someone carrying a placard saying that Black women in the UK are 5 times more likely to die in childbirth than white women. I just was like, what the hell? Like, how and why? So yeah, I'm really glad. I mean, it's another reason why it's great to have you here. What have you been unpicking around that and the reasons behind that?
So we have to unpick that there's so many different things. Partly it's awareness, education. And one of the things I'm working with loads of charities and organizations is that unless the campaigns include people of color, whether they're fashion campaigns or just awareness campaigns, then people don't even know they can get cancer. So if you don't see yourself in these adverts or campaigns, then you don't know that it's going to affect you. So I think that's one big thing. We have to also remember the socioeconomic things. So many of these things are socioeconomic, and the governments are not really unpicking these things. And, and there are things like, for example, if you look at certain areas in the UK, where there's a lot of social housing and stuff, there are food deserts where it's hard to get fresh fruit and vegetables. We have to think about how many jobs people are working. We have to think about the fact that there isn't equality in our social system, and that impacts our health. So if you're working 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet, then you are going to be more stressed. If you're facing racism and microaggression, you are going to be stressed because you're going to have higher cortisol levels. And, for example, really small things. I did a radio interview the other day about breast cancer, and the radio presenter said my name wrong. I said, I'm sorry, but my name is this. And then he said, I'm sorry. Oh, that's quite hard. And my name's not hard, it's Toral. It's really simple. And he said, oh, I'll try. And I just thought, hang on a second, that's a microaggression. How would you like if I called you Joan and you're called John? I mean, these are the kind of things that people don't realize that really impact our health. And you've got to think, a lot of people that have come here have come for various reasons, not just because they think they can make more money or anything like that. It's because they've had to. For example, my own parents came because they lived in Uganda, which was a British colony, and Idi Amin, the dictator, threw all the Asians out. So they didn't really have a choice. So it was quite frantic and probably very stressful. And actually, my parents don't talk about it, but that's also impacts how they are with me and how they are generally, because for them there's some scarcity, and it's, you know, we're a really like middle class family with lots of resources, yet obviously all those things impact and how people are viewed and seen. So I think there's so many different aspects of this, you know, the education, the cultural aspects, the religious aspects, and if we don't train our healthcare professionals to also work with people differently. If, for example, if we think about nutrition, say, oh, you need to lose weight, oh, you should eat like more quinoa and kale. Hang on a second. If you're from maybe a Black African or Asian, Pakistani, whatever, you're not going to want to eat that. So we need to be giving appropriate advice and thinking about the cultural aspects. And actually, I'm going to be doing some talks about this next week with World Cancer Research Fund, look at inequalities of cancer care, because there are huge inequalities.
Mm. And you yourself have had breast cancer twice, haven't you? And so this is something that you're passionate about, not just because you're a woman of colour in healthcare, but you're also a woman of colour in healthcare who's had breast cancer twice. So it's something that's personally very real for you.
It is very real, but I will say that because I've always worked in cancer, and I went to medical school and I worked in research before I had breast cancer, it did give me a lot of knowledge base. So I don't think it affected my kind of diagnosis or treatment, but there's a lot of people who it has affected their diagnosis and treatment. I see them and I hear their stories, and because I have a voice, I want to use that voice positively and support it, because really I can't condone any women. I just, you know, really, unless we have equality for all women, we're not going to be able to help ourselves become more equal to men until we're acting, you know, have equality for women, you know. So I think this is the thing, like I'm very much about, you know, why are some things that are happening are really so that women are not focusing on the fact that we're still not equal to men and not being paid enough, and, you know, all the rest of it.
We're touching on some massive subjects here already, aren't we?
Really?
5 minutes in, 10 minutes in.
I said, someone said to me, you don't really do small talk, do you? I said, no, I find it quite boring.
Yeah, well, you know, we need to be talking about the big subjects, don't we? And looking at how we can change them. I think one of the things you said, you know, especially interesting for us, sort of working in the environmental field, and especially sort of pioneering things like refill and reuse. It's important for us to kind of be mindful around some of the products that come out that are, say, plastic free, can cost more, and therefore are perhaps sort of not inclusive of people who are from a lower income. So that's something that I think, you know, the environmental movement needs to be aware of. And I think to a degree, you know, some are, certainly at City to Sea, we try to kind of show how different things save money. But, you know, if you've only got a budget of 20 quid each week, you're not going to spend 20 quid on a menstrual cup, for example, are you?
I know that there are lots of schoolgirls who are getting period products, but a lot of them are not plastic free period. They're getting free period products, and they need those free products. And maybe that's where we can think about making a little bit more change. So introducing when people are working with these kind of campaigns to help girls have, so they don't miss school, that maybe we could work with, you know, to provide plastic free products.
Yeah, which is what we're doing at City.
I know.
That's good. It's good, but God, yeah, it's still a drop in the ocean. There is such a long way to go. So in your line of work, like, what's been your relationship to plastic, and how is it a topic that's come up in your work, especially around cancer prevention?
It is something that comes up, and I think there's loads of people who probably know a lot more than me from the environmental impact of plastics and toxins in the body, but particularly in functional medicine, that's something we talk about as functional medicine practitioners. So for me, it's looking at how plastics act as xenoestrogens, so they kind of can act as endocrine disruptors. And for me, I'm very passionate about working in not just breast cancer, but hormone-dependent cancers. And actually, I want to do a PhD at looking at kind of the impact of diet and lifestyle. And it's something I would probably include in the conversation, is the impact of all the plastic. Because the thing is, we now have so many chemicals and things that we don't even realize are plastic related in our day-to-day environment, which build up within our system and can cause estrogen dominance, which is actually impacting the whole of our hormonal system and disrupting it. So we do have more cases now of polycystic ovaries and infertility and all sorts of other things. And this may be due to this estrogen dominance, which we've never really experienced before the last 30 or 40 years, because we have this high level of kind of plastic or plastic related products. So one of the things that you could think about is like a paraben, and there are loads of studies to show parabens don't cause cancer, but I don't think it's about causation as such. I think it's about your system getting disrupted because there's not a balance. And I think that's what the whole thing about the environment is. It's all about balance. And when we think about even our gut microbiome or anything else, it's when things are out of balance that things don't work. So this is where I think it does keep coming up. Personally, I've been pretty much against particularly single-use plastic for a very, very long time. Well before it became cool and trendy, I was carrying my bottle and my cup and all my stuff with me, my Tupperwares, not my Tupperwares because I have like a metal tin and all sorts of other things. But I do think it's become an everyday thing now, but we all have to make the difference. And I think in COVID, what really upset me was that people stopped taking reusable cups, and I had to really fight for my local coffee shop or wherever I was going to start taking the cups again or whatever it is. And I think they forgot, and even if you think about the amount of plastic masks you see everywhere now on the floor and things like that, that's problematic.
Yeah.
And that's going to affect health as well.
Yeah, there's been a massive onslaught of plastic pollution as a result of PPE, and maybe you can show your local cafe our contactless coffee video to show them how they can give you a safe refill of your coffee cup. But it's there was something I wanted to pick up on when we were talking about plastics and food, because there are studies that say that we're consuming something like, it was like between like 11,000 and 12,000 like pieces of plastic a year.
Wow.
And that was, I think that came out, but especially if you're eating like oysters and mussels on a regular basis. I don't know what a regular basis is. I probably eat oysters maybe like once on a birthday party or something. Maybe if I live by the sea, it might be more often. But yeah, so because of the oysters and mussels, like you're eating the whole body of the fish, of the animal. And then there was another report coming out saying we're eating something like a credit card's worth of plastic a month or something. So things like BPA and like, is it bisphenol and those sort of chemicals, as well as the endocrine disruptors, or are they the endocrine?
They are the endocrine disruptors. Those are the things that, and I think people haven't really put those two things together. They kind of use these things every day, or they eat, as you said, food or fish or whatever, and they don't realize that we're ingesting so many microplastics, and this could be impacting our health. I'm not saying that it's impacting everybody, because obviously everyone shops and eats in a different way, but how do we work with suppliers? Because a lot of the time it's not the poor fishermen or anyone like that, it's the big brands that are creating these products who are not responsibly getting them returned to them or recycling or things like that. I mean, if you look at the plastic patrol figures and all the things they pick up, there's so many like Coca-Cola bottles and things like that. What was it, Lucozade or something like that, one of these sports drinks?
Yeah, I was doing a Lucozade post the other weekend after picking up tons of them on
I think it was you. Yeah.
It might be me.
It was you. I was like, hang on a second, of course it was you.
There was this girl on Instagram doing this thing. Yeah, no, Lucozade are notorious. And plastic control,
film, right?
Yeah, exactly, which make it non-recyclable. And there was a lot of information, and there's been studies to show that bottled water has more microplastics in it, and there's little sort of bits leaching, so it can leach from the sides, but also bits of plastic can get in there. There have also been reports of microplastics in tap water, so it is something that we're consuming. And in terms of our menstrual products as well, like as the human body, especially a female human body, would be absorbing more of these chemicals through using conventional period products, because of the mucous membranes in the vagina being much more absorbent than, say, our skin. Have you read studies that have talked about that?
So there's definitely some interest and some research in that, and we definitely need a bit more to do more studies, but sadly female studies are never funded quite as well as men's studies. But what's really interesting is that we're starting to understand a lot more about our vaginal microbiome and how important it is to create balance, and for to help with our hormones to work, optimally. So is introducing these plastics into our system in the form of maybe period applicators or whatever it might be, is this disrupting our vaginal microbiome? There's definitely some studies to show it potentially could be. There isn't that many, but there's a few things. So it's something that we don't actually think about. Do doctors or do people at school ever get, is this ever discussed? And I think that we're now starting to really understand that how nuanced our body is, and so many small things. It's not even about the big things. It's almost about all the little things that add up and kind of tip things out of balance. So we know how, the last 10 years of research has massively increased to show that our gut microbiome, which is the beneficial bacteria in our gut, is so important to our health. And actually we can't do without it. It's so important for our immune system, for our mental health, all sorts of other things. Now we're starting to see all the other microbiomes, so the vaginal, for example, or the mouth or things like that. So I'm sure that there will be more studies to look at that. But for me personally, I'm actually somebody that's never used tampons, whether it's with applicators or without applicators, for various reasons. But now I know for myself that it's definitely the right decision, because I have a hormone-dependent cancer, breast cancer, and I don't want to be, I'm trying very carefully to minimize some of the plastics and chemicals that I come across. I'm not saying I cut everything out and I just really rigid about it, but the things I can do at home with the products I put on my skin, the products I put inside my body, the food I eat, at least then I'm doing these things most of the time. And obviously when I'm out and about, it's slightly different.
And I think some people have said, researchers, that any amount of the chemicals that are found sort of on non-organic tampons that they found, pesticide residues. Obviously we know that a lot of conventional period products have plastic in them, even a tampon would have a plastic weave around it on a nylon string, and they're saying that kind of, even if it's minimal amounts accumulate when you clock up the hours that's actually inside the vagina over the lifetime of someone having their period. So it can really add up. So I think that's what you're talking about, is that kind of minimizing your exposure, because we are bombarded through our makeup, through our what we eat, through what we breathe, through what we put on our skin, our clothes, all of that constantly.
And if you look at some water suppliers and you look at men's health and children's health, men and children are getting much more estrogen into their system from people using hormonal contraceptives and stuff like that. So girls are getting their period far earlier. Is this linked? Potentially, the amount of plastic there. And so these xenoestrogens that we talked about, which can almost mimic estrogen and can disrupt the hormone system, is that impacting our health? Because we also know that if you have your period for longer, you start it earlier, that can increase your risk of hormone-dependent cancers. So really? I think there's so much to discuss and discover still in research, and we need more funding for things like this too, because I think traditional medicine, allopathic medicine, finds it a little bit no. But then if you look, and that's why I'm really interested in the more integrative and functional medicine. And actually, I was at a really interesting conference, Your Life in Cancer, last weekend, and it's coming up again the following weekend. And they're talking about these things and the environmental toxins. And I think that's something that if you go to your normal oncologist or your breast cancer nurse, they won't be able to have those conversations because they just don't know anything about, they don't know anything about nutrition. So I think we need to learn more, and then we need to educate our healthcare professionals on this too.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think even just knowing a few sort of conventionally trained nutritionists, some of the advice that I hear from them, I'm kind of really? Does that sort of almost feels like there's sort of some real gaps. So it's exciting to hear that you're pioneering some of that change as well. In terms of your own sort of diet and relationship to sort of plant-based foods or still eating meat or choosing organic, what's your sort of, I'm guessing there's not really a one size fits all kind of sort of anti-cancer diet, but for you, what are the key factors?
So the key thing, which I will say to anyone for any health concern, including cancers, eat the rainbow and just eat more plant-based foods.
Eat
and that
the rainbow.
eat the rainbow, but you don't need to be vegan necessarily, but we just don't eat enough plants. And if you think about traditional diets, whichever country they might come from, they just ate a lot more plants, partly because, when we were poorer, we ate a lot more fruits, vegetables, legumes, whole grains, because these were filling and nutritious and fiber filled, and meat was expensive. So this is really like, if you look at my Instagram, you'll see my food is very colorful. I do eat meat, I do eat fish, but I would say that at least half of my plate, if not more, or at least half my meals, if not more, are vegetarian. I grew up kind of mostly eating vegetarian food at home and a little bit of meat and fish when we're out and about, but it wasn't something that was necessarily something we ate every day. Well, it wasn't, we just didn't, basically.
I will say they are incredibly inspiring and delicious and mouth-watering, gorgeous posts that you put on there. If I haven't said it already, it's the Urban Kitchen to follow Toral on Instagram.
And I think that people forget that these are the things that we need to start off with, are how many of us are eating 5 portions of fruit and vegetables, let alone 7 to 10, which is actual, if you look at the science, that's the actual recommendation, but the government sticks to 5 because we're not even getting to that. I mean, the average for women is 4.3, and for men it's a lot less.
Does a rice cake count, Toral?
No. It's been puffed and then it's been stuck together, and then I'm like, So I think this is where we need to start looking. And also fiber, so many people, our recommendation for good health is 30 grams a day, but most people probably eat between 12 to 18. Women are better than men, as usual, so that's kind of always my kind of takeaway is, let's just all eat more plant-based food, and that includes fruit and vegetables, whole grains, legumes, beans, nuts and seeds, herbs, salads. There's so many things you can eat, and then I do eat fish, and I think this is where we have to sort of think a little bit harder. And and if possible, I try and eat wild fish rather than farm fish for all sorts of reasons. But then this, or at least supplemented with an algal kind of omega-3. And I think that's really, really important. And then the other one's vitamin D. Like, we are so deficient in this country.
Aren't we?
Yeah, we are insufficient as a society, which is why COVID could be particularly bad, not, along with levels of obesity. But vitamin D is, and you think it's particularly, the recommendations that are made are for white young men, not even for women, let alone people of color. And women need different amounts necessarily. People of color need more, older people need more. So for me, this is like something that I pretty much anyone I work with is check their vitamin D levels and stuff.
Very, very excited that you're mentioning that, because I am mega interested in health, and I take quite a lot of supplements, which is actually probably the hardest thing for me to phase out plastic, is in my supplement. Sort of, that's like my guilty secret, is my supplement cupboard, because it's quite hard to find plastic free good quality supplements. Generally I try to buy in bulk as a way to minimize the packaging on those, but like in the UK we don't produce vitamin C between October and May, like
October, March, probably end of March, October, March. But the other thing is that, let's take for example this year, we were all inside a lot more, and we were allowed that, there was a few weeks where we were allowed that for 1 hour a day, of which some of that had to be shopping and exercise and all those things. So we certainly weren't outside for long enough. If you're adding in things like sunscreen, you're not going to be making much vitamin D. If you're covering up, wearing long sleeves, if you're culturally wearing, a hijab or a covering, you're not going to be making enough vitamin D. So this is where supplementing or eating vitamin D rich foods becomes really important. But then again, like, we have to look at the plastic in that perspective, with fish and eggs and things like that being vitamin D rich foods. How much plastic is involved in that too?
Well, depending where you can shop. Our new app, it's our same refill app, but we've just expanded it this week so you can find your nearest zero waste shop, and you can sort of eat, drink and shop with less plastic. So hopefully that will help people connect a bit more to local shops. And I think like it's one of the great things about that I found, and that some people did report through COVID and through lockdown, of just kind of building more connections with their local shops, and actually sort of, certainly for our local health food shop here, they actually have really good quality and really affordable veg. So I think it's kind of that scouting around, isn't it, to find organic food that's not wrapped in plastic, that's hopefully then still costing less than buying it in a supermarket.
I think finding a local fruit and vegetable market is always so helpful because things are bought loose. And if anything, they sometimes put them in paper bags. But I have a whole lot of kind of netting bags that I just take with me everywhere now. And I think it's about shopping, and that's what the sad thing was again about COVID and lockdown. So many people were, had to use food delivery services or supermarket online delivery, and the amount of plastic, and like, why can't they sell these things loose? I just don't understand. And I'm really excited to see that some of the bigger supermarkets, I know Waitrose is trialing out in Oxfordshire a kind of a refillable thing. So why can't we order it? Because all grocery shops used to be like that in the 50s. So why can't we return to that?
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of, it's happening. It's just slow, isn't it? It's sort of, it's slowly turning, especially with those online deliveries. There's still a lot of work to do in terms of minimizing the plastic in those. So we could talk all afternoon. I literally think there are just so many subjects that you've got this kind of amazing sort of macro perspective on all of these issues. So I'm sure we could have you on again and talk about 5 of them in a separate call. But just kind of zooming out, like in that sense of seeing the link between planetary and human health, just as our kind of closing sort of thoughts, really. What's your perspective on that and the relationship between us as humans and our health, and then the health of the planet and the environment?
It's so linked. Why are we as human society suffering from so many diseases? Because our planet is ailing. It's not, we're not looking after our planet. We're not creating the food. We're not looking after the soil. Even the way we farm is so intensive. We'll have to regenerative farming. Why are we farming monoculture? And then we wonder that we're most of our food is the same 3 crops, and we're getting really sick. As in everything, diversity is key. So our environment requires diversity. Our gut microbiome requires diversity. We require diversity of foods. Yet with processed food, that's just not happening. We're eating loads of corn, we're eating loads of sugar, we're eating, soya, all of these things, or our animals or whatever is eating that. So I think it's really linked. And I think it was really interesting that last year the Lancet did a planetary health report. But for me, the problem with that is there were loads of holes in it. And I'm not going to go into it in massive detail, but who it was funded by was big food companies. So they've had a massive interest in it. And the foods they're telling you to eat, well, these processed foods. I'm like, hang on a second, that's not good for human health or in the environment. And some of the things that they forget is with regenerative farming, to make our soil good, we need animals. We can't get rid of all animals. We need animals to poo and basically regenerate the soil. And these are the kind of things that weren't really discussed in detail or looked at. There's so many like new brands coming out. Like I know, like I will talk about the Beyond Meat burger. The Beyond Meat burger is this like plant-based burger.
Yeah, but what do you think about it?
When you look at the ingredient, I've never eaten it, by the way. I don't know what it tastes like.
It's really good. It came in plastic, but it tasted really good.
But the ingredient list is like distressing. I wouldn't want anyone to eat half those things. So I'm like, well, that's great. So on one hand, it's not an animal, but then it's got all these other products that we don't really want to be encouraging people to be eating for their long-term health. And actually, are some of these good things really impacting the environment anyway? So soya farming, we know, is massively decimating some of the forests that we have. So we need to really think about this in a much bigger way, in a much macro way. And I think the problem is everyone's become so divisive, just like with every other area of health and well-being. And I think that's where we don't have people that really understand it. And also it makes it worse when we have health and environmental ministers who know nothing about health and environment, and they make policies which are really all about money and about lobbying from brands, then it is also problematic. And that's the same thing that happens in the US, the same thing that happens in the UK. And we've left Europe is actually slightly better, the EU, at protecting against these things. They think about it a little bit more logically, and now we've left. So I'd be really interested to see. I mean, like we're still campaigning to not have like chlorinated chicken and all kinds of lower quality food shipped over from America. Now that we're trying to create these free trade deals, that's going to impact our food. We've been so lucky until now. We've had really good quality food, which is actually not being that expensive. if you look at the quality of fruit and vegetables that we can get in this country, things are going to change. And I don't think people realize that, and not particularly not the people that voted for Brexit. So I think it'll be really interesting when they realize this. We're not helping farmers. In fact, I saw something the other day which showed that in one supermarket in Tesco's, it was cheaper to buy milk than water in a plastic bottle. And I thought, imagine that and work that's gone in for the cow to, like, it's ridiculous. We're not supporting good quality regenerative agroforestry of a good quality farming that supports the environment. And there's so many ways we can do this. If you look at things like the Soil Association or some of the agroforestry that's happening, it's incredible. It looks after the planet, it looks after people, it looks after the animals, it looks after the ecology, it looks after the diversity, yet we're not doing it because it's more expensive. It's not as ethical, like we're not even, there's not as much ethical kind of food. So, but there are some really great brands like Ethical Butcher, Ethical Dairy, which looks at all of these things.
I'm so grateful for the Soil Association in our lives. They do incredible work, don't they?
Yeah, they really do. And I think that I wish supermarkets would get more onto it. And it's problematic. And then you have to think about, again, as you talk, and going back to the beginning of the conversation, is that it's terrifying when you think about you wanting people to eat fresh fruit and vegetables when a punnet of grapes is £2 and a bag of 12 crisps, full of plastic, by the way, is £2 too. So, there's a lot of work that needs to be done on the
and one bag of plastic-free crisps is £1.
Yeah, exactly. And so all of these things. So we have to look at the kind of socioeconomic aspect too, and the structural aspect of what's happening, and that's really important. And that's something I don't really see our government doing.
Yeah, me neither. Well, Toral, you inspire me, you educate me, you make me smile, and I love following your journey, and I know that you are a change maker in your own right, and so thank you for the work that you do. If people want to get in touch, what's the best way to hear you talk and to find out more about what you do?
So there's lots of things on my website, www.theurbankitchen.co.uk, but I'm most active on Instagram, which is @theurbankitchen. I'm on all the usual kind of places, but I'm always doing free talks and webinars at IG Lives. And my whole thing is people, planet, pocket, because we have to think about all of those things. Yeah. So everything I talk about will link that, and people's health is so important. And unless we look after our planet, we're not going to be able to look after people's health. So I really appreciate you inviting me to come on to speak today. I love CTPC and what we do. So thank you.
Thanks so much. And hopefully we'll have you on again and unpick some of those big subjects next year. Thank you.
You've been listening to Nat's Chats. Thanks for tuning in. See you next time.